Welcome to Who Cares, a podcast by SEIU 2015. I'm your host, Arnulfo de Cruz, president of SEIU 2015, the largest union of long-term care workers in the country. We represent over 500,000 caregivers in California who show up every single day to care for older adults and people with disabilities. Today, we have a very special episode for our listeners. We're celebrating the 10-year anniversary of SEIU 2015. A decade of organizing, winning, and showing the world what worker power looks like. And we're doing it with someone who means so much to the members of SEIU 2015, to the labor movement, and to our communities that we call home. Someone who helped to build this house and this union. Someone I consider a personal friend, also a predecessor of mine, but most importantly, someone who's beloved by the family of SEIU 2015, a national leader in the labor and political space, the one and only Senator Laphonza Butler.
Thanks for having me, Arnulfo.
Absolutely. Senator Butler is the former president of SEIU 2015, the past president of Emily's List, and of course, the former U.S. Senator for California. She's a lifelong fighter for working people and a proud care champion. Welcome home.
It's good to be back. It's hard to think about it's been 10 years since we did the work with the members all across the state to create our local. And so I'm glad to be asked to join at such a special time.
So grateful to have you. And to our listeners, when Laphonza was serving as president of SEIU 2015, she had this incredible idea that, by the way, I still get members almost weekly to remind me of the listening tour where under President Butler at that time's leadership, we visited, I think, 42 counties. One of the moments that I cherish most is listening you tell your story, kind of what inspired you to be the person and the type of leader that you are. Before we talk policy or power, usually we start this podcast talking people. With your permission, Senator, I'd like to start there. And just was wondering if you could share perhaps your caregiving story, maybe a time when you provided care for someone or someone close to you was a caregiver, and what did that experience teach you on what was to follow?
Yeah, Arnulfo, it's again such a pleasure to be able to spend time with you and hopefully with the members who will listen to this podcast who might not have heard my story when I was leading the union. And so much of what I was able to bring to SEIU 2015 and the members and staff there was really grounded in my own experience as a young person. My mother worked as my father's caregiver. By the time I was 15 years old, my father passed away of heart disease. He had had 6 heart attacks. He'd had a stroke. He had had angioplasty. And the whole while, I watched my mom do the kind of work that the members of SEIU Local 2015 do every single day. In addition to being my father's caregiver at home, there was a period in my life where she was a CNA in a nursing facility. I remember being in the 3rd grade, and my mom worked the overnight shift, the 11 to 7, and she would get home in time enough to walk me and my brother to the crosswalk. And so much of what I saw her go through as a healthcare worker that didn't have healthcare, as a caregiver who gave of herself every single day, but felt like so many people didn't see her as a human being, as a contributor to her community. It really grounded how I thought about and was able to engage authentically with the members of first 6434, then ULTCW, and what became SEIU Local 2015. And I think we were able to bond and truly build connection from that space of really me growing up as the child of a caregiver and understanding so much, not just what the members themselves were going through, but what their kids were going through.
I'm glad you referenced kind of some of the early days. You led this union essentially from its founding. I'd like to take folks back perhaps a couple steps. And how did SEIU 2015 come to be? What were some of the early fights like? We do continue to talk about Verdia Daniels and Ophelia McFadden, and specifically the Black woman leadership as foundational in our local and so many others. But what did it mean to unite so many caregivers under one banner, and you being someone who saw much of that journey?
Yeah, it is it's quite awesome to think about when you're able to really appreciate the power of everyday people choosing to do something extraordinary. The early organizers of the home care movement in SEIU were, my predecessor leaders in SEIU, talking about leaders like David Rolfe and Kirk Adams, and Andy Stern, right? All folks who were on the ground in Los Angeles and throughout California, really trying to help home care workers win their voice, and to be able to fight for their patients and clients and community members. And it was early 12, I believe 12 long years of organizing and trying to find a way with the California legislature, that led to the creation of 434B, the first Los Angeles Home Care Workers Union. But then, once that was able to take place, home care workers across the state were able to organize in different local unions, all across the state, and different international unions, both SEIU and AFSCME. And over the years, I think what the early leaders of our union came to learn, and really what was inspired by the members on the ground in California, was that their true power was being united into one union, not being divided into 58 different counties, but being united in one union. They really could leverage the power of their voices, and the patients and clients that they serve, to really create long lasting change and make these jobs that would be family sustaining, to be able to win true health insurance and wage increases. And I had the opportunity to come and be a part of what was United Long Term Care Workers West, and to be able to work with leaders like Louisa Blue, who was the leader of SEIU Local 521, who had home care workers, and work with leaders like Dave Reagan, UHW president, to be able to and to work with Doug Moore, the leader of the AFSCME union that represented home care workers as well, to create a shared vision with the members across the state, that really acknowledged the power that they had when they were able to unify and be under one banner of caregivers, and building a true caregivers union, that was led by the voices, hopes, dreams, wishes, desires, and courage of caregivers. And so being able to do that really was a special opportunity, a special responsibility, one that had been years in the making, not without its bumps and bruises along the way. I made mistakes and didn't always get it right, but could always count on the members to support me and to lift me up and to pull us all through the building of the union. Having traveled to all of those counties, learn not just about our blue cities, but about our red counties, to learn about what the contract and bargaining strong contracts actually means to members of SEIU Local 2015 who identify as Democrats, and those who identify as Republicans and independents and everything in between. And so the power of building SEIU Local 2015 really stemmed from the desires of the members, the leadership of our unions, and I think the vision that was about winning across the state, not just in the counties that may have had the resources to put into a contract.
Thank you so much. It's such a fascinating history of struggle and perseverance and staying inspired to continue to keep building. And I'm grateful just to be a very small part of a piece of that journey with you. And I know that perhaps some folks listening were with you every step of the way. We still have some leaders in the union who remind me a lot of the big moments that they were with you as a part of this journey. And I was just curious, maybe if you could share maybe some of the biggest challenges or triumphs in those early years? Are there any moments that still stick with you?
Arnulfo, there are so many moments that stick with me. I find myself, no matter the situation I have been in or who it is that I might be speaking to, whether, when I was the president of Emily's List, when I, served in the United States Senate, I told the story of home care workers. I told the story of nursing home workers and the experiences that we had had. Most of those we were winning. Some of those we had some setbacks. And being able to share with my colleagues in different in work environments, the courage of home care and nursing home workers, caregivers, men and women who just do incredible things and taught me so much about organizing. There's so many moments that I can think of. I think about my first time bargaining the Los Angeles County contract when Gloria Molina, Zev Yaroslavsky, all were still a part of the LA County Board of Supervisors. Mike Antonovich. It could have been, it was a really intimidating space to be in as a 29-year-old. And I remember Reverend Chip Murray from Fame, who was there on behalf of our home care workers, uh, who just sort of looked me in my eye. We were on the same panel that was testifying before the board of supervisors, but who could tell I was a little afraid. He looked at me in my eye and he said, "You just know that you're doing God's work, and your members are doing God's work, and we're here doing." The right thing, and you say what you have to say, and don't let anybody back you down. We didn't win the contract that we wanted that day. But from that day forward, I knew that those members were really part of their community, and they had won the hearts and minds of not only clergy icons like Chip Murray, but really had earned the respect of county supervisors who appreciated the work that they did and the contributions they made. And we were able to win in that year the largest single contract increase that they had ever won since they organized the union. And that laid the groundwork for the next contract that really became a part of the national fight for 15. And so there's so many victories and challenges, Arnulfo, but that one is one that really does stick out for me. Having a leader like Chip Murray, encourage you and put his hand at your back and tell you how you have something to say, and these folks are going to listen. Was is one that definitely stands out for me.
In the 10 years that we've launched as a union, it's been pretty incredible to see what the union has been able to accomplish. Raising wages in dozens of counties, expanding Medi-Cal, securing PPE investments in the body of work that the union did during the COVID pandemic, passing historic bills like AB 283, statewide bargaining for home care, and then just most recently being in a position to fight back some pretty terrible budget cuts to both IHSS and nursing homes. Are there any other victories that stand out to you most, or perhaps ones that felt like turning points in the movement for caregivers?
The One of the things that I think about often in my time as president, Arnulfo, that the members taught me really connected to a broader victory for all of California, including the caregivers that are members of 2015. One of the things that they taught me was to look at that I needed to look at them as whole people who lived whole lives, and as much as they were proud members of SEIU 2015 that fought for strong contracts and better benefits and giving them a voice on issues like retirement and healthcare. It was talking with our members around issues of quality public education and criminal justice reform that really do stand out to me as some of the most impactful work that I was able to stand next to the members of 2015 to do. When it came down to increasing the and making taxes fairer in California when the state was facing such a large deficit. It was not just about the wages, the money that could be put into wages for home care workers, but it was about making sure that more resources were going to public education. It was a part of fighting for infrastructure investment in the state into our local cities and towns that reminded me that our caregivers definition of health and safety also included the quality of sidewalks that they had to walk on when they were taking their clients out for exercise, or they were taking them to the local grocery store. And so I think a lot about the role that SEIU Local 2015 played in those kinds of pieces of bodies of work, pieces of legislation, even initiatives. Our members were, I learned, really exercised around the environmental justice and living in communities where, battery waste was being buried and dumped in their communities, and being able to raise our banner on an issue like environmental cleanup were real moments of pride for me, and I think for our union. It was the unexpected power of coalition building and togetherness that I think really helped to validate the voices of caregivers in spaces where they just hadn't had an avenue to participate before.
I'm reminded that you inspiring us to go on this listening tour, we heard so much back other than what many may consider kind of the bread and butter union issues: wages, benefits, working conditions. And I think your vision to remind us that caregivers are also members of their community, right? They're having to deal with these issues that you just mentioned on a daily basis. And as we build our union strong, we would frankly be remiss not to address these things at the same time. So we're involved in things like affordable housing that we had very little experience around as a union, restorative justice, as you mentioned, environmental justice. And I just, we're so appreciative that we actually are in spaces now where we get to work on these things that are incredibly impactful for our members, and these issues that are so impactful to our members. So just really appreciate you sharing that history. One of the biggest moments of the past decade has been the Fight for 15. And the Fight for 15 has your name all over it. I still remember the day I think that it was signed, and you were right next to the governor when it was being signed, and I saw a smile on your face, but it was the smile that you often have, where it was a reflection of a moment that was bigger than just you, and you understanding that what we had just done was going to impact 6 million working people in California. And so you were one of the earliest voices pushing for the $15 an hour minimum wage. And I just remember thinking, what an incredible idea. I'm not certain that as a labor movement, we've gotten to a point of understanding the significance of that strategy, which is we bargain for our members' contracts, and that's incredibly important. But are we missing the boat if our vision is not broad enough to think about what could we do that would have an impact to working people beyond just the members of the union, and what that means ultimately to build power for not just our members, but all working people. And I think this was an incredible example of that. What inspired you to call for that, to envision a different outcome for the minimum wage in California? And also maybe how did people react at the time? As I recall, when it first started being announced, some people obviously were incredibly excited, but my understanding is that there was also a lot of resistance.
I would be remiss if we didn't start this conversation by acknowledging the airport workers in Seattle. They were the first to make such a bold declaration become reality. And the leadership of the members and courage, frankly, of the members of SEIU 775, who were willing to put their resources on the line for workers who were not members of their union, but to test the theory of doing work and having a broad declaration and a bold statement. And could we organize people around it? And so David Rolfe and the members of SEIU 775 really got the conversation, moved the idea of a $15 minimum wage from conversation to implementation. And then I would say came the opportunity for California. And folks will recall it really was one of those all hands on deck, take little steps to get to big steps kind of strategies. And so, appreciating that it was the cities that actually were the beginning of the conversation, moving from just discussion to action. Cities like Richmond and Oakland and San Francisco and Berkeley, those cities where we felt like we needed to demonstrate that there was a willingness to meet the demand, and it really came down to political courage. And so when the coalition was able to get itself established to then move to a larger city like Los Angeles, where the politics was a little bit different, and the environment to getting to a $15 minimum wage was going to present itself as more challenging just because of the size of the city of Los Angeles. Being able to work together with Rusty Hicks, who then was the leader of the LA County Labor Federation, and build a unlikely coalition of small business owners and nonprofit associations, and having the testimony of the local dry cleaners that came and talked about in city hall chambers what it would mean for them to be able to pay a $15 minimum wage and to attract and retain good work and workers and provide a higher standard of living for their employees. It was an incredible feat to get the $15 minimum wage passed in the city of Los Angeles. We then went to the county of Los Angeles, and then we went to a statewide posture, working with my colleagues in SEIU and across the labor movement in Sacramento. To put together with the California Labor Federation a ballot measure, and get in conversation with the governor and the legislature, Speaker Rendon, and others about how we could move this faster legislatively and not delay, and have people to wait another year and a half potentially for a ballot measure to pass. And one of the things that was in that bill that was specific to caregivers and sometimes gets lost in the conversation is that prior to that time, caregivers in California had no paid time off. And we wanted to get sick days, and we had tried to get it through the legislature with then Senate Pro Tem Leader Darrell Steinberg. And I would get on the calls with our members and have to have them talk me through hard decisions about where we were with the legislature. But then we had this opportunity to make the $15 minimum wage possible statewide, and we put on the table very clearly, and with great boldness, that we wanted to use this opportunity to get caregivers paid time off. And I remember being in the governor's office, and his team, Nancy McFadden and his budget leader, were saying, nope, the governor's not going to do it. And I walked away from the table. The entire state council walked away from the bargaining table. We're not compromising, not on behalf of caregivers, not on the backs of caregivers anymore. Are we going to be compromising? And the staff were really, really afraid that the governor was going to walk away from the deal. An hour passed, 2 hours passed, no call, no call. And then the governor's staff eventually called back and said, okay, governor's going to give you, governor's going to give home care workers paid time off. And, I still find great fondness in that story and lessons in that experience, times when I um, can hear the voices of the members of Local 2015 who put it all on the line for the city of Los Angeles and the county of Los Angeles. None of those wage orders actually changed their paycheck. It wasn't until we were able to do it at the state level that home care workers were going to be impacted. And the fact that the governor's team initially wanted caregivers to sacrifice again, um, but that our members had the wherewithal to put their hand at my back, just like Chip Murray did that first time in Los Angeles, put their hand at my back and say, no, President Butler, you hold firm. Um, there's so many just high quality lessons that I've learned from these members that have not only changed my life, changed their life, but changed the lives of, as you noticed, 6 million Californians, and the ability for caregivers to be able to have a day to take care of themselves. Um, that's life changing impact, and I am so grateful for the courage of the members of 2015 to be able to stick with it, to to understand that there was a strategy to what we were doing, that there was a method to our madness, and the first attempts didn't really impact their wages, their paychecks, but if they stuck with it, if they invested in their neighbors, if they, came out and turned out and put their political capital on the line for their communities, that we would get there. And they stuck with it and they made those investments and we got there. And it's one of the proudest moments I think that I'll ever have as a part of the labor movement, to be the first state to move to a statewide $15 minimum wage, and to be a small part of that it's just a incredible experience, filled with so many lessons along the way, but definitely great partners to do it with as well.
Senator, that's a golden nugget of California labor history. I didn't myself hear, I haven't heard that full story. What a incredible story that you just shared with our folks listening, who maybe we have union members signing up today who don't know that the leadership that you provided in that moment, the courage that you got from our members, helped to establish a $15 an hour minimum wage and sick days for caregivers in California is just really remarkable. And, as we think in this moment around the enforcement actions on immigration, the threats to how low income or Americans receive healthcare through Medicaid, what does the Fight for 15 story say about worker power?
Yeah, no, look, I think it's such a great question. I think what that experience of the California labor movement and states across the country who were subsequently able to do it. I think the leadership of the members in 2015 and SEIU and Local 775 and other unions that joined the broader movement, the folks who made it happen in New York, in the state of New York, and who invested to help workers in states like Arkansas, who raised their minimum wage around the same time. This movement, I think, what it should inspire us to remember, even as times of despair come upon us, that we shouldn't allow ourselves to be distracted from the true power that we really have. In so many ways, Arnulfo, it's by design that workers are facing so many of these attacks. It is not an accident. It is happening on purpose, I think, to test the will of our communities to truly stand together. And what the $15 minimum wage fight and movement has at least was a takeaway and a lesson for me, was that there is nothing that we can imagine that we can't accomplish if we choose to do it together. And that's the hard part. There's always an attempt to divide because one family may speak a different language than another, or come from a different country than another, or have a different religious practice than another. Because of them, it's their fault that you don't have what you need. But that is a message that is a lie on its face. And the $15 minimum wage movement really, I think, showed us the power of rejecting those lies and choosing to unify with our neighbors, because it's our differences that make the bills stronger, that make the process better, that make the idea sharper. It is that diversity that makes us who we are as a movement in the labor movement, but as the American people. One of the proudest practices that I think the members put in place at Local 2015 was to make sure that people who spoke a different language could still participate in the union. And when we started doing all of our meetings in 8 languages and started having, all of our materials translated, I think, fundamentally changed the dynamic and the relationship between members who spoke monolingual Spanish and members who spoke monolingual Cantonese. Fundamentally changed the relationship because they could understand each other, and most importantly, they could understand that they have so much in common. And to me, that's the lesson of the Fight for 15 movement, that we can do hard things when we choose to do them together.
Those are incredible lessons, I think, for the labor movement, for us as leaders, for our members, that there's nothing that we can accomplish if we can imagine it and dream it. And I think this is just such a beautiful example. Those victories, the moment that you were in, the courage and the leadership that you provided with the strength of our members to get those things done is, I think, inspiring and a good reminder of us not falling short and dreaming something big, even as difficult in the moment is that we're in. So really appreciate you sharing that. I don't think if it was not for that Fight for 15 victory, San Francisco home care providers with political courage, as you said, are now on a path to $25 an hour, right? So that as a foundation has continued to pay dividends and impact caregivers' lives in real life-changing, meaningful ways. And we're so grateful for your leadership in that moment. Fast forwarding today, California finds ourselves in a difficult financial situation. There's a lot of experts who say that it's a number of different things, right? Including many of the ill-advised policies coming out of Washington. But in the end, we are faced with the budget. Governor Newsom's budget proposes deep cuts to long-term care, including IHSS overtime, the increasingly difficult Medi-Cal eligibility and the funding for it, and then also nursing home oversight. They're all on the proverbial chopping block, so to speak. And I know that you're very familiar with these fights. What gives me confidence is the stories that our members share to our elected leaders about what these programs mean for them, for their ability to care for their children, for their clients, what this means for the future of care, and how people age in California. This is a critical moment and the stakes are high. How do we keep pushing back when political leaders will try to balance the budgets on the backs of caregivers?
The powerful thing, I think, that the members who are moving the union forward, and members and leaders who are in charge of stewarding this great asset that is 2015, I think the power that you have is the experience in knowing that you've done it before. So often we find ourselves in situations and we lose the muscle memory that we have come through hard things before. This is not the first time that California, the state, has found itself in a budget deficit. This is not the first governor who has proposed disrespectful, I don't know what other way to put it, unfortunate cuts on the caregivers program and systems. This is not the first legislature that didn't have all of the answers, and this is not the only time, the first time, nor will it be the last time that the union, the strength of the union, the power of the union, the unity of the union will be put to test. And There are solutions. We always find ways to solution, working with legislative leadership, and sometimes working to elect new legislative leadership. There's This is not the first time that we always find solutions working with the governor and potentially having to find a new governor. And so, like, that is the strength of 2015 and caregivers in more generally, is that every pathway is hard. The pathway to building our union was one that was filled with challenges and obstacles. The pathway to winning healthcare coverage for the first time was filled with challenges and obstacles. And everybody always said there was no money. And when our members say to legislators, show me your budget and I'll show you your values, that is a real statement. And we can't sit in Sacramento and say we value caregivers, and we value the patients for whom they are providing care, and then take them propose policies that would take their wages back to the days of not being allowed to have overtime. And you can't say that we were able to make it through a COVID pandemic when nursing homes were so fraught. And then you say you want to have less oversight in nursing homes. And so I think this is an opportunity, and there will continue to be opportunities and moments in time where leaders, stewards of this great asset, will have to rely on what they know to be true. That is that they have the power to change it. They have the unity and the intellect in their union to find alternatives and different pathways. And ultimately, they have the ability to vote for the kind of elected representatives whose budget actually reflect their values.
You're exactly right, right? And to get to those situations, we really do need to have people who are courageous, right? And it starts with us as a union and our members. Talking about the future, you've now led at the state level, the national political level, and in the United States Senate. Um, and there's not a day that doesn't go by the way, not just me, but many others say, we just hope that we get a call from Laphonza that she is going to continue to lead people in some way because you have an incredible gift for leading. And I know that it's really guided by your values and who you are. But you mean so much. You've meant so much. You continue to mean so much for our members, for the labor movement. Where do you see the labor movement headed? I think, especially for caregivers. I know that we're living in really difficult times with a lot of uncertainty. Maybe you could just share a little bit about what gives you hope. What do you think the labor movement or caregivers union should be preparing for in the next 10 years or so?
On the horizon for both caregivers and for the labor movement generally is the continued evolution of technology. And how do we position ourselves, our members, our communities to be at the cutting edge of that? So that we are prepared for those evolutions, for the deployment of artificial intelligence. How do we take advantage of it so that it works for every member, whether they speak English or as a primary language, or Spanish or Vietnamese, and making sure that whatever technological advancements are coming, that they take into consideration the human work that is required as a part of being a caregiver, and across different industries, sort of beyond caregiving as well. And so I hope that this union labor movement is doing a couple of things. One, looking at technology to find opportunities and identify challenges so that we can get ahead of them. The second thing is I would hope that today's labor movement in the next, is looking to the horizon for young workers. There's a generation of workers and worker leaders that are being shaped and developed by these times. And there is a wealth of talent. I spent my entire Senate service, talking to young leaders across the state of California, and they are ready to lead. And I think the labor movement tendency sometimes to be filled with leaders who have, remained in positions of leadership for decades. We'd be wise to start to make succession plans and to bring in those new generations of workers and worker leaders. And the last thing, if I were to say one other, Arnulfo, it is, don't forget about the Midwest and the South, the working families who have lost so much in the Midwest, and those who never had the opportunity to be a part of the union in states like Alabama and Mississippi and Georgia and North Carolina. I know that it is difficult and that many unions have tried, but I just would ask us to not give up on those regions of the country and those workers and working families where we're going to see a resurgence of manufacturing and semiconductor development and clean energy industries that begin to emerge alongside our traditional industries in farming and agriculture. And let's not forget that those workers need the power to change their lives too.
Wow. I think the beautiful thing about a podcast is if this was a situation where I was having to take notes, I would feel bad because I may have missed all of these incredible suggestions. So fascinating, inspiring. That means so much as I and other leaders and with our members think about a future of care in a country that we can be proud of, and just appreciate you sharing some of these big questions of our times and how we grapple with them and use them as we continue to build power. So very grateful. When I had the privilege of working with you, I was a young father. I want to say we were both young parents. At that time in the labor movement, I wasn't used to working with people maybe my age with children, helping to lead the union. And I'm so grateful that I felt like you allowed me to feel I could be proud as a dad and be proud working for the union as I was struggling to balance both of those responsibilities. I still haven't completely figured it out, but just so appreciative of you saying that this was a union that was welcoming to families and that we had to build power
We were.
as families and individuals together, and just really grateful for those lessons that you taught many of us when we had the opportunity to work with you in the union. We're going to do a quick fire round, if you will. This is supposed to be a little bit cute, but just a few rapid questions.
All right.
One word to describe SEIU 2015.
Courageous.
One win that still makes you tear up.
Sick days.
One message you'd give to the next generation of worker leaders.
Never give up.
There you have it, folks. Senator Laphonza Butler, thank you so much for joining us and for everything you built. We're walking on the path that you've helped to pave. To our listeners, SEIU 2015 has spent 10 beautiful years organizing, mobilizing, struggling, and winning. And in many ways, we're just getting started. You've just heard from the senator the things that we need to be considering to build a future of care that we can be proud of and that meets the needs, not just of caregivers, but of the folks that our caregivers care for in America and in California. The fight for care justice, for living wages, for respect is ongoing. And we need every listener with us. Join us, speak out, take action. Visit SEIU2015.org to learn how you can get involved. And if you're a caregiver, know that you are not alone. You are part of something very powerful. Senator Laphonza, and I know that our advisory committee members in the early days of Local 2015, our members and staff and many others, Laphonza is a quote that you always used to share with us. So I think you attributed to John Quincy Adams, but that till this day, the member leaders of our union have never forgot and can say it word for word. It's, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. So Senator Laphonza Butler, again, really appreciate you joining and so grateful that you could spend time with our listeners today. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you next time.